I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ, and I am so glad to have here with us today Jarian Gibson and Eduardo Molina to give us an encore presentation of their Synergy session, although it is updated. This will also give you a chance if you missed it at Synergy or you had more questions or you just wanted to be able to ask them in real time, you'll have that opportunity now. Be sure to use the question panel in the GoToWebinar control panel, and they will keep an eye on those. And one other little detail, we are recording today's session, and you will receive a link via email tomorrow when that recording is ready to be viewed. So with that, I will hand things over to Eduardo and Jarian to introduce themselves and get us going.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stephanie. My name is Eduardo Molina.
And my name is...
Go ahead, Jarian.
Go ahead, sorry, you paused, so go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Eduardo Molina, I'm the end user architect for Round Tower Technologies. We're based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Covered the whole country, though. Happy to be here with you guys, member of CUGC Cincinnati leader, CTP, and VMware Champion 2017.
And my name is Jarian Gibson. I am an independent consultant based out of the Kansas City area. I am also a local co-leader of the Kansas City CUGC group, a CTP, and a VMware EUC champion as well. Like Stephanie said when we started the webinar, please feel free to ask questions or tweet us. We both have our Twitter handles right there on the introductory slide.
Awesome. Anything else we should take care of before we get started, Stephanie?
No, I think that's it. And if you have time throughout your presentation, if some of the questions you think have a broader appeal that you'd want to ask out loud, that might be useful.
We'll definitely do. Hey, Jarian, why don't you take us through this?
Yeah, so a couple things we're going to show here is from the VDI Like a Pro survey that goes out. It's a pretty wide survey that hits multiple countries, lots of users out there. And, you know, last year at Synergy, we actually compared the three of the brokers, which was RDS, XenDesktop, and Horizon. And with the majority of the popularity and some of the changes, this year we focused on just Citrix and VMware. But if we're looking at the SBC/RDSH brokers out there from the VDI Like a Pro survey, you kind of see that a lot of people are already moving to XenApp 7.6 or newer. And I think a big reason for that is because you have 1 year left to get off of XenApp 6.5. So we're seeing a lot of uptake, a lot of people migrating, and you're also seeing people, you know, that are on the 7.0 to 7.5 also upgrade to the newer ones. I think with 7.6 being more popular is because we have both of the cadence cycles on 7.6 or newer, which is going to be the current release or the long-term service release. But then you see in there, you know, pretty much the top three brokers out there are going to be, you know, on the RDSH SBC side, are going to be XenApp, RDS, and VMware, with a few other products out there. But your main three are going to be Citrix, Microsoft, and VMware when it comes to RDSH. Now we look at from the desktop side, or the VDI side. For virtual desktops, you see again, no surprise there. Citrix is, you know, from this survey, does have the majority of the stake here as well. Again, being on XenApp 7.6 or newer. But from here, you're kind of seeing that Horizon, you know, whether it's 7 or 6, is, you know, just behind there. And 7.0 to 7.5 has kind of fallen off, and then you kind of see Microsoft kind of fall down the ways as well. Again, you're going to see Citrix and Microsoft be the leaders in this space. We do have some stragglers coming in, but when it comes to virtual desktops, these are the two big guys out there you're going to see on the market, and this is what myself and Eduardo both see when we do consulting on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. And again, just to restate what Jarian just mentioned, These numbers are from you guys, from the community that came in and help us to answer the survey. It's, you might hear different numbers directly from Citrix or directly from VMware. That's what we always encourage people. That's what Jarian and I, of the rest of the community, you will see the retweets, the emails of this survey every time it comes out, because the more of you guys participate, the better this information is for the community. And again, this is completely independent, community-driven survey that help us all out. It's not a Gartner-driven, it's not a Citrix or VMware-driven.
Yeah, and also too, we also encourage that, again, this is community feedback, community driven. So every year as they release this, and you can get the full report from their website and see all the breakdowns and all the different metrics they have. But every year we encourage you to make sure that you fill this survey out and encourage others to do so as well.
Yeah, if you go to www.vdilikeapro.com, that's where the whole survey is in there. There's a lot more information than what we're showing. We picked a few of them, but if you go to that website, you sign up for it, and you will be able to download the full PDF with all the results, which it also has hypervisors and storage and so on, some other things there. So moving on, we have been hearing from Citrix and VMware a lot of, back and forth between, hey, what is really costing my solution? And that's what we want to talk about VTax a little bit. So, Jarian, why don't you give us your perspective on VTax?
Yeah, so this was kind of a funny cartoon that I made that was kind of a joke out there, kind of about the VTax. Really, when you look at VTax, we'll kind of talk more about the virtualization layer, the hypervisor stack piece of the product. But when you look at whether you're going with a Citrix solution, you're going with VMware solution, and you're buying Nutanix, all of them include the hypervisor with their product. So VTax is kind of that marketing term that gets thrown out there, because if you see here, and as we move on from our nice little cartoon slide here, one big point that we both want to make, and go ahead and forward that, Eduardo, is that both XenDesktop and Horizon include the hypervisor. And what that means is if you buy XenDesktop, you're going to get XenServer. If you buy Horizon, you're going to get vSphere for desktop. So the VTax is kind of a funny thing that we hear out there and that we kind of made a joke out of. But in all reality, when it comes to either solution, you're going to get the hypervisor with it. Now, with XenDesktop, you do have a choice to use Hyper-V, Acropolis hypervisor, to use VMware. But again, if you're buying Nutanix, you're going to get Acropolis hypervisor with it. Then, if you want to use Hyper-V, Hyper-V does have a free edition. What you're more paying for is using the management layer of System Center, but that's a choice. And then if you want to use vSphere with XenDesktop, again, that's a choice. And, for us being US-based, taxes aren't really a choice. You're required to do that by law. So that's where I think that whole VTax thing is kind of like a funny / marketing joke to me.
Yeah, we have opportunities, we have choices to make. We do understand that a lot of organizations have settled and standardized, more than settled, sorry, standardized on vSphere as their hypervisor. Therefore, if you guys pick Citrix as your broker and your organization is standardized on vSphere, that's your decision. You can continue to pay for that as you grow your environment, or move to XenServer, Hyper-V, as Jarian just mentioned. But on the other side, you don't have to. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we drill down.
And a key point too, I wanted to just add there real quick, Eduardo. A key point too, I know in the earlier days of XenDesktop, and not so much as of lately, you made a key point as companies are standardizing on a separate hypervisor. I know in the earlier days of XenDesktop, and probably up until recently, the last probably year or so, you were seeing kind of more of a mix of hypervisors out there in the shop, where they would standardize their XenDesktop workloads on one hypervisor, maybe XenServer or Hyper-V or whatever, but still have vCenter or vSphere for their data center workloads. But I'm seeing more of that standardization come into play now, to where across the data center you're seeing less of a mix, and you're seeing more of that standard on both sides of the workloads.
Definitely. So moving on from the hypervisor and the VTax part, it's how about provisioning methods? That's something that we usually tend to get questions about, and have really passionate conversations about MCS versus PVS and so on and so forth. The survey, show us that 31% of you guys that answer to this question or this survey are still using provisioning services, and most likely will continue to use provisioning services. Um, link clones, and that was kind of surprise for us. Link clones versus full clones, they're very, very similar. So there's still a lot of us out there using full clones when delivering, server workloads, SBC or VDI. I also believe that instant clones will start getting momentum based on the new feature that came on 7.2, that now you can use instant clones on any storage. Before we were kind of limited to vSAN and hyperconverged. Now we're a little bit more open on where we can use them, and in our personal implementations we have actually been using instant clones a lot more. What do you think about that, Jarian?
Yeah, and same here. So, like I was saying earlier, and both of us do implementations on both sides here. And on the Citrix side, I used to be a long-term provisioning services guy. With some of the changes in the enhancements in storage technologies, the emergence of hyperconvergence and web scale type stuff, I have since more pushed over to the machine creation services side. But typically, it's not one versus the other. It's going to be, what's the right tool for the use case that you're doing. And then on the VMware side, for me, I've mostly standardized on using instant clones if possible, especially with it being included in Enterprise Edition of Horizon. To me personally, and this is my opinion, I see link clones more as legacy on the VMware side and instant clones being the future. So hopefully we see that trickle down to other editions, especially for the fact that we'll talk about later on is the different components you need to do some of these different provisioning methods, whether it's machine creation services, provisioning services, link clones, instant clones, etc. But for me, full clones is not surprising. I do see a lot of customers who take their existing workloads and their methodology for deploying their images, whether it's MDT or SCCM or another tool, and moving those into full clone desktops and managing those the same way they do as a physical desktop with those same tools. Now, some of those customers over time, they've started moving into using some of these different provisioning methods in their environments. But as we talk about some other methods coming up too, we'll talk about some of those changes as well.
Yeah. And it's that's a very good point that you made, Jarian, on instant clones being an enterprise feature right now. We hope and we have give feedback to VMware that we hope that the provision mechanism or methodology trickles down to lower licensing tiers to make sure that people can take advantage of that great technology. How about user environment management?
Yeah, so on the user management side, personally for me, when I'm doing a deployment, whether it's Citrix or VMware or whatever, majority for me on the Citrix side has always been Citrix user profile management. Since Citrix has acquired Northscale, I'm starting to use the workspace environment management kind of swing upward, but workspace environment manager and Citrix profile manager kind of go hand in hand because the profile management side will handle the user settings and the workspace environment manager will handle the actual workspace settings and give you that contextual performance type stuff as well. I'm not usually the bigger one in the third parties when it comes to the user environment management space, and it's more user environment / user settings space in this survey here because some of these things are purely just capturing user settings. Some are, configuring their environment. Some are workspace. Some are just doing certain things. So there's a mixture here of what's seen, and especially on the VMware side, if they're using enterprise, they're going to be using UEM over Persona. Again, just like my statement before, with link clones, I think that Persona management, and this is my opinion as well, is a legacy product as well, and hopefully we'll see VMware do some changes in that space.
Awesome. Sorry, let me get next slide.
And then here with application layering, we're seeing a lot of people not use application layering. From this survey, you're seeing about 75% not using application layering, and which is not surprising to me because like my statement I said before earlier, I'm seeing a lot of full clones out there where they're using their existing tools to manage those desktops or those XenDesktop servers or RDSH servers. So it's not surprising that we're not seeing a lot of uptake in the application layering space. We have seen Citrix, acquire Unidesk to get that layering piece, which, with Unidesk and it being renamed to app layering, I think it's more of an image management piece than more of an application layering piece. And then we're seeing app volumes out there as well, and then seeing other products too in this application management, slash layering, image management space. Other things like FS Logics also, especially with Office 365. But we're showing here some of the different survey results out there. So to me, it's not very shocking that we're seeing a lot of people not using these products yet. But I'm seeing a growth in that space.
Definitely, and I'm with you, Jarian. It's something we have discussed as we were preparing this presentation for Synergy, and actually over the last couple of weeks when we were working on this presentation for CUGC. And one of the topics we wanted to bring up as part of the presentation is, there's still a lot of people doing nothing but just deploying manual applications, going through the next, and creating the master images and bake them, as we call them, bake them into the master images, the applications. But also the difference that we see between, Citrix app layering and app volumes from VMware. The app volumes we see more like an application streaming or application containerization without the isolation piece that Citrix used to have with app streaming, but more similar to that. Well, as Jarian mentioned, the app layering from Citrix, formerly Unidesk, we see it more as a image management, even when we talk about elastic layers. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah. So how has the EUC landscape changed even since May? Because since May, when we did this presentation, we were based on 7.13/7.14 for Citrix. We were based on 7.1 for Horizon. But since then has been a lot of changes. 7.15 came out, and also 7.2 from Horizon came out. Why don't you take this one, Jarian?
Yeah, so some things from the Citrix side. We've seen some acquisitions out there. On the Citrix side, they bought Northscale, renamed that to the Workspace Environment Management to do your workspace setting and performance. They acquired Unidesk which has been renamed to app layering. But again, I see that more as an image management solution and not just app layering. And then you're seeing with the release of 7.14, we're really seeing that local host cache kind of come full circle in 7.x, where in the past it's been the connection leasing. But we're seeing, the more support for localhost cache, and it's now time for those people on 6.5 to migrate off of 6.5, especially with only having a year left, and go into, at least 7.14 to get some of these features. On the director side, we're seeing the GPU monitoring, especially with the NVIDIA GPUs, disk monitoring side of director. The multi-licensing type is kind of a huge one, to where we can set licensing per delivery group. So we can set the user device versus concurrent. Now, we can't mix the actual addition, but we can mix the actual user device versus concurrent licensing, which helps it a lot in those environments where they can deliver those different use cases based on that delivery group. We're seeing other things like graphics enhancements and the protocol enhancements with the adaptive transport and EDT in 7.14. And then we're seeing some stuff around AMD, specifically with XenServer, where we have AMD shared GPU now for HDX 3D and when used with XenServer. Again, another XenServer feature with graphics is the Intel Iris Pro, and being able to share out that GPU on XenServer, and then the PBS accelerator on the XenDesktop side, to where if you're using XenServer and PBS, you can greatly reduce the amount of traffic between your XenServer host and those target devices running on them and your PBS servers by having some of that cache on the reads on the XenServer side using that PBS accelerator. Excuse me. With Horizon, we're seeing the changes of instant clones, and then come out with instant clones for RDSH workloads, instant clones for graphics. They did briefly have a tech preview for instant clones for XenDesktop. Not going to get much into that. We saw their Blast Extreme and their Blast Extreme Adaptive Transport, or B protocol enhancements, to where they're really doing their enhancements on the protocol side. They've has since renamed their access point, which is a virtual appliance, which is kind of the replacement for security server, and since renamed that to the Unified Access Gateway, which is kind of their front end to their identity, the Horizon side, and also the AirWatch side as well. And then just recently, they released a help desk tool that runs on their connection brokers to give you some of that help desk management that they were greatly missing, which directors kind of had since the inception of XenDesktop. And then other things in the market that we've seen change, especially from the user side and the workspace side, is that we've seen the emergence of Avante. First they required AppSense, and then just recently they required with software. So we're kind of seeing those EUC landscape changes, and you're seeing companies make lots of enhancements and also make acquisitions as well.
Yeah. And another big update that we might forget here is Horizon 7.2 also brings a lot more new features for the Linux desktops, and we have actually seen a lot of people asking for Linux desktops. We have worked with a company, for example, that 50% of their users are using LibreOffice on Linux desktops. So when they were trying to move to VDI, that was one of the questions. Hey, can we do VDI with Linux desktops? And they didn't ask specifically which broker they're going to use. Their question was, we want to continue to leverage our Linux desktops with LibreOffice for their workloads. And with all those SaaS applications out there that are web-based, that they needed, they basically had 10 apps that were SaaS web-based and only 5 or so applications that were FAT clients installed. So for those that needed those 5, they still on Windows, but for everybody else, which was around 50% of the company, going Linux desktops is a reality. And Horizon 7.2 is bringing USB redirection and client drive redirection to make sure that they're on par with what Citrix has been doing on the Linux side of the house as well. The other thing that I would like to mention is both have increased capacity or resiliency, if you will. Scalability has been in the forefront of both of them. So that's also things that have improved the last couple of months. So how about the desktop virtualization stack? So we want to make sure that we presented you guys, and I know this is not new to anyone, or I hope it's not, and if it's new, we wanted to make sure that the way we see a desktop virtualization stack, right? We're going to have a computer and storage layer, which nowadays you have a plethora of options. You can do what they call the traditional 3-tier architecture. Now you have hyperconverged infrastructure. You can actually go to the cloud and not even care about those. You have your hypervisor, which depending on which solution you pick, you will be limited to one. Other solutions might have more hypervisor support. And then you have your control access layer, your infrastructure. How do you manage your group policies, your databases, your licensing? How do you do provision? How do you do the access control? And those are things that, as you will see in our presentation, we will talk a little bit about, the hybrid cloud and not just the whole cloud. Why don't you take a top tier? Maybe
yeah.
not.
So then we're looking at different points of like the brokers for the control and access layer. Things like your connection servers, your controllers, your image management provisioning, the layering type functionality, and then looking at some of your user settings with the golden images, the applications, and then the access and the endpoints being like the receiver, the Horizon clients, HTML5 and so forth. So that kind of rounds out what our desktop virtualization stack looks like. So when we talk about the different solutions between Citrix and Horizon, you kind of got to know your provisioning and your management options. So with XenDesktop and XenApp and in the later versions, they did add support for full clones inside of the workflows when you create your catalogs, or being able to do your full clones outside with just using VM templates and so forth. Horizon has had the ability to do full clones for a while. And then we're looking at things like provisioning services on the XenApp side, which is going to be, if you're a Platinum customer, you're going to have that option to deliver your desktops or your XenApp servers that way. On XenDesktop, you're going to have that with your Enterprise and Platinum editions. When you look at machine creation services being built into the actual delivery controllers, that's going to be available to both on all editions. With link clones on the Horizon side, you're going to have that available in all editions on both sides. And then for instant clones, if you're an Enterprise customer, you're going to have that. And again, like I was saying before, to me, that's kind of the future for VMware, and link clones is more legacy to me.
Yep. And interesting enough is we have heard from customers where they don't, for XenApp specifically, they want to continue to use PVS, but as you upgrade your licensing, PVS, or as you move into your new versions of the product, PVS is not longer an option. You can not longer buy PVS a la carte as you used to. A lot of us, when I was a customer, we bought PVS as an add-on. That add-on doesn't exist anymore. So you have the options to go MCS or upgrade to your licensing to XenApp Platinum and get a few more features, not only PVS, but that's one of the value added that comes from your PVS solution.
So when we kind of break down to what support on the provisioning methods, the image management, the delivery, and the hypervisor, one of the big things you're going to see here as far as the hypervisor, of course, with Citrix, you're going to have the option of using the 4 different options out there, along with different cloud options. With Horizon, you're going to be limited to vSphere. There is some cloud announcements that we'll talk about a little bit earlier that they work with. And then look at the delivery of some of these different provisioning methods, where the majority of them are storage-based, except for PVS, where that's more of a network-based option, network streaming, and that's more, you'll see that on the virtual and the physical world, where the rest of the options are just on the virtual world. Now, for me, PVS used to be a big piece on the physical side, especially on education, but I haven't seen that as much lately as I'm doing my deployments. And you look at some of your different storage options, you see most of them are data source snapshot based, and then you're looking at PVS is kind of the one different there, with the disk being VHD/VHDX. And then we're also seeing some of the things on the infrastructure side where they're integrated into the products for everything except for on the Citrix side. PVS is a separate component that you have to install and maintain, and for link clones, that's going to be a separate component, whether you house that with your vCenter server or on its own machine to be able to do link clones. And another bonus there for instant clones is that it's built in. There's no extra composer component that you're going to have to maintain and look for and have a SQL database for. And again, that's why I see instant clones being the future instead of legacy, versus legacy of link clones on the Horizon side.
Yeah, and the speed of deployment, right? The speed of where you can take from you have 10 and you need to upgrade to 20 machines. That can happen in matter of minutes, if not seconds, compared to a little bit longer process on the link clone side of the house. One of the biggest things, as Jarian mentioned, the no SQL dependency is huge. Is one less component that needs to be taken care of. Backup, DR. It's a very, very good feature to have there. Okay, there you go.
And then we look at, we talked about Linux here earlier, so looking at some of our management and provisioning methods for the OS support. So, with Windows, it's going to have support across the board, right? There's really, it's a first-class citizen. Depending on your solution, Windows is going to be available for both MCS, PVS, full clones on the Citrix side, link clones and instant clones and full clones on the VMware side. And then you're looking at Linux, to where on the Citrix side, this did go away for a while with PVS. When PVS first came to Citrix through the acquisition, they did support Linux. It did go away for a couple of years, but in the most recent additions, they brought back Linux support for PVS. So you do have that provisioning mechanism on the Citrix side if you're doing Linux desktops and Linux workloads. And for me on the Linux side, I've seen more interest in this on the educational side and on the development side. For me, I know there's been people with graphics use cases, but for me, it's mostly educational and development.
From the hypervisor side of the house, and how does it integrate? What we want to highlight here is, from a Xen server, you have full clones at the pool model, and PVS and MCS all at pool master level. So when you talk through basically Xen Center, they're talking to your pool master. From a hypervisor perspective on Hyper-V, you can do the known like VMM, SVCMM, or the scripting method that actually Jarian will actually talk a little bit in the future. You have from a Nutanix AHV, if that's a hypervisor you have. There has been a scripted methodology that was developed by a fellow CTP, Ryan Reward. He developed a script to actually do the integration between the Citrix management consoles and PVS. For full clones and MCS, you can do either built in your direct studio or scripted. And there's a plugin that is in tech previews coming out in the next version of AHV that will support direct PVS management direct PVS on AHV from the PVS management consoles. From a vCenter perspective, as we mentioned, link clone and instant clones are the main things there for Horizon. Link clones uses Composer and vCenter. Those are the requirements that we need there. And then for instant clones, your connection servers will talk directly to vCenter to make that happen. One requirement for instant clone is that you need direct access to AD. So actually, when you configure instant clones, it will ask you the AD credentials to make sure that everything works there. You still can use all the Citrix features like PVS and MCS through vCenter. That's the integration point for those deployment mechanisms. Anything else there, Jarian?
Yeah, just on the VMware side, I mentioned, I'm sorry, on the VMware, the Microsoft Hyper-V side, you see there where VMN for full clones and PVS can be scripted, and you can use those solutions without using Virtual Machine Manager, but if you're using machine creation services, it's required. So as we kind of move forward here, I'll talk about some experience from doing a project and also some lab testing that I did when looking at using the PVS wizards and doing scripted on the PVS side. So go ahead and move us forward there, Eduardo, please.
Yep.
So I was doing a project, and I was doing some more testing on my own, and I wanted to show some things here about using the wizard versus scripted. So you see here kind of on the charts here with doing PVS at different levels, and then using different methods, whether it's going to be the XenDesktop 7 wizard, which is the XDSW, or the streaming VM setup wizard, or scripted time. You see different deployments here in some of the results that I saw. And this was doing this with 713 PBS and testing some things. And basically what I saw, because I've long time used the stream VM setup wizard as opposed to the XenDesktop setup wizard. Just because it's always been faster and it's more flexible than using the XenDesktop wizard setup wizard, in my opinion. So I started seeing some things and scratching my head and like, why is this taking a lot of different, longer to deploy? Sitting here watching it and stuff. And then I forgot that in the later editions of PBS, when you actually run the wizard, that it's going to boot up each machine when you use a XenDesktop setup wizard. It's going to format the write cache for you. While that write cache is being formatted, and on that first boot, it's going to set it to cache on server instead of cache on disk, and then shut it down and change it back. So that's where that discrepancy came from. So then I went ahead and said, okay, well, let me see if I can script this and see how fast it was. And scripted, basically doing kind of the same thing as the streaming VM setup wizard does, except I'm able to do multiple data store locations. To where today the stream VM setup wizard can only do one storage location. That's where the template's going to be at. Also, being scripted, getting more flexibility and tested this, and these are some of the results that I saw. So when I talk about being able to use Hyper-V without doing Virtual Machine Manager for full clones and PVS. Go ahead and skip forward, please, Eduardo. So these are some of the things I saw in some of that same process I just talked about. So the XenDesktop setup wizard, disk and template get discarded. It's going to boot up with write cache to server. It's going to go ahead and create your BDM and write cache disk on separate disk, shut it down, and then change the write cache settings back. The stream setup wizard you'll see here, it's going to basically honor the storage location of the template. While being fast and doing some testing, I found out the scripting method was faster. I'm able to do scripting and importing variables to do multiple storage locations. I can use my template that has the write cache disk. I can put a small BDM partition on the front of that write cache disk if I'm going to use BDM to boot, and I can use Hyper-V without SCVMM. And I've done some deployments with customers to where we've done Hyper-V, used PVS, or used full clones for XenDesktop, and able to get around having to use Virtual Machine Manager. The biggest thing there is that when Microsoft changed the System Center licensing, especially for smaller customers, you couldn't get Virtual Machine Manager as a separate component. And so, when you go to the newer versions of it, you buy in a System Center, and some customers didn't want to buy into that. So we found ways around it by using scripting and getting around using the wizards and so forth. Now, you do miss some things, but you can do a lot of the management from the PVS console. Again, you can script it when you want to add more. If you want to even scale them down, you can do some scripting there as well. And once I get all these scripts cleaned up, I'll be putting all these scripts out there on GitHub to share with the community as well. Also, it will be my multi-hypervisor instead of just using Hyper-V or VMware. It'll be multi-hypervisor as well.
And when we talk about all these things that Jarian just took us through, is when we start getting the questions from customers and from partners and from peers. Which one is simpler? Which one works better? Which one makes my life easier? And that's when we took the simplest design we could do on either solution, right? What we call the bare bones. And at the bare bones solution, on the left-hand side, you have a XenDesktop solution. Right-hand side, you have the Horizon solution. And as you can see, they look very, very similar. So when you begin with, you have your storefront server that can live on your delivery controller. So you could do that. Is that a best practice? No. But definitely, for POCs, for small shops, that can definitely work. It can run your directory, it can run your studio. Then you have your auxiliary servers like Active Directory, like SQL Server, and your licensing server that talks to a gateway, which in this case we have a NetScaler gateway. Any customer could buy not a full-blown NetScaler, and we'll talk about that. Just get a NetScaler gateway with the licensing that you have. On the right-hand side of the equation, what you have is what we call the new Unified Access Gateway, formerly known as the security appliance, that is coming to replace the security server for obvious reasons, right? You don't want to continue to have Windows servers on your DMZ that you have to patch and can have a bigger surface, attack surface, aka you want to think about WannaCry. And that comes into the connection broker that definitely needs a vCenter to work. The connection broker does have the admin website built in. It does talk to a SQL server, and that's one thing. Even then, one thing to remember, you might say, hey, but you just said that if you use instant clones, you don't need a SQL server. That is completely true. But if you want to keep history of your event database on Horizon, you still need a SQL database. It will be a very small one, but there's still a need for some sort of database to keep your event viewer for Horizon, or event logs, if you will, even on a SQL database. So in essence, they look very similar. Right now, they both have Linux hardened appliance on your DMZ, and a Windows-based storefront or web interface where the users will then start consuming your SBC workloads or your VDI workloads. And the problem comes when you scale out, right, Jarian? Or the difference, not the problem, the difference.
Yeah, just some things to mind about both solutions is that when you scale out, you might want to start breaking out those components. And you see here on XenDesktop versus Horizon, Depending on how you size and scale your XenDesktop environment, you can combine some things into the same virtual machine or same machines. You know, some things like the controller, storefront, the WEM console, and the WEM broker piece. You can combine those to kind of still keep your environment lean. You just want to watch your performance there, especially with the CPU and the RAM on those machines, especially when you're starting to get into 714 and localhost cache, because there is some guidance out there on memory and some of the overhead that can happen with that. So in a XenDesktop side, you can combine these components. And I put an asterisk next to provisioning services because, you know, that's more of an option. If you're using cloud, that's not an option on the XenDesktop side. But if you're going to be using PVS, you know, that's a decision point, a design point. It can be a PVS or MCS or both, depending on your environment. I do have some customers that have used both. I do have other customers that use one or the other and standardize on one. And then you have some of your other optional components like session recording, app layering, and so forth. And then of course, for remote access, you're going to want to at least have that NetScaler gateway. And a lot of these components, whether on the XenDesktop or Horizon side, you're going to want to have redundant components so you don't have any single points of failure in your environment. On the Horizon side, I did put an asterisk next to connection servers because on the Horizon side, where they do combine the controller piece / broker, the monitoring piece with the help desk and the events database, and along with the actual access, which is kind of their storefront, the web access to get to things, and the connection piece, is all kind of combined. I put an asterisk here because if you want to do two-factor versus single-factor, that's where you're going to kind of break those out to separate connection servers. So say, for instance, you want some users or inside, outside have different access or different authentication methods, inside being two-factor, outside being single-factor. That's where you break those out. On the security server side, which to me, I feel that in most of my deployments, I go with the new access gateway for Horizon because it makes things simpler, because I view the security servers as legacy. And typically in majority of environments, you're going to have those connection servers with the security servers with that multi-factor authentication for external access. If you go with the Unified Access Gateway, which is that virtual appliance, you're going to have those where they have the authentication point on that for multi-factor authentication, and then just only have a pair or so of connection servers for that access. And then you'll have things like the user environment management and app volume. So it kind of depends on the Horizon side of if you're staying with the security servers versus the Unified Access Gateway. But I do feel, and I like the way that you're going with the Unified Access Gateway because that's simplifying the amount of components as you start growing out your environment with your users.
Yeah. Two other things to mention here. When you're looking at the scale and number of servers, you know, if you look at the hard numbers, and I'm not gonna say that you know this is true or not, which is the published number by both vendors. A delivery controller by Citrix, they put on their design handbook that can have up to 5,000 sessions per delivery controller. On the connection server side of the house for Horizon, those are set at 2,000. So on the same type of environment, you know, you can have, for example, if your environment is 10,000 users, you're going to need, in theory, you know, on an N+1 situation, 3 delivery controllers on Citrix, and then you're going to need 6 delivery controller or connection servers on Horizon. The other thing to point out here is your Unified Access Gateway is not a load balancer. So if you want to load balance that, you still will need a third-party component. You know, could be even a NetScaler or an F5 or a CAMP load balancer in front of your delivery controllers. Well, if you get a NetScaler, in front of your access gateways or connection servers, but if you do get a NetScaler, you can automatically, you know, you get an automatic load balancer for your storefront and for your DMC itself.
Another thing I want to point out here, because we had a good question here about vCenter and needing to be scaled out and so forth, and whether you're using XenDesktop or Horizon. You know, on the vCenter side, you are going to want to look at the sizing and scalability of that. And typically, as you start scaling out your environment, whether you're on the XenDesktop or Horizon side, you might want to build it out in pod/failure domains because you don't want to get a solution to where everything's in one basket depending on the size of your environment, and one component going down can cause a widespread outage. The same thing would be with Hyper-V. You want to look at the sizing and scalability of Virtual Machine Manager, to whereas you're not looking at that middleman in the case of Nutanix, Acropolis, Hypervisor, or XenServer, because those are built into the solutions, but you're looking more at your cluster and your resource pool side. And again, depending on which size or which solution you're using, which hypervisor you're using, you always want to look at building pods in failure domains because you don't want to put all your eggs into a single basket. And then there are some other good points here in the chat too as well. We've got to mention about some of the scale outs. With 7.14, they did scale up the size of the users, the VDAs per zone, and the VDAs per site as well, and then some of the connections too. So we are seeing, like Eduardo did mention earlier, we're seeing scalability improvements on both sides. But both of them did add a lot more in their latest releases.
Definitely. And when we look about the scalability, we start also looking into convenience, right? So, Jarian?
Yeah, so a couple of things here on both sides of looking at here, and this is just from field feedback when doing both, whether we're doing side-by-side POCs, bake-offs, testing one versus the other and so forth, is on the Horizon side, being able to do the on-demand provisioning and then being able to do the scheduling built in of your image updates is one of the feedback that we get often on the VMware side. And this is actually built into when you set up your desktop pools and you do your image management and so forth. Now, on the Citrix side, you do have this functionality in a way, but it's not natively built in to the solution. So go ahead and let's move forward a slide.
Mm-hmm.
Now with Citrix, they do have a solution called Smart Tools. And with Smart Tools, what it does is you're able to do Smart Scale. So if you're a Platinum customer, you're entitled to this functionality of Smart Tools. So you can do your Smart Scale by capacity, power things on and off, do certain metrics. This is not only handled just on-prem, but if you're doing things in the cloud as well, because it can, if those things aren't in use or at certain thresholds, you can power things down so you're not getting charged for things you're not using or things that aren't very active if you're in the cloud for your workloads. Now, there is ways out there where you can do some of the scheduling and the on-demand provisioning type stuff through PowerShell. Jim Moyle and Andy Morgan did before it was changed to Smart Tools, they did a lifecycle management session where Jim Moyle actually demoed doing Smart Scale before it was actually a product using his PowerShell and the ability to kick off scripts and be able to, based on what's in use, scale up and scale down machines in the environment before Smart Scale was out there. So it's great, and there's a lot of feedback that it's built in on the VMware side. It's nice that Citrix has the Smart Scale and other smart tools as well. We'd like to see this also kind of built in to the delivery groups on the broker side as well, or have some kind of API access to it. Now you can do things if you have Platinum and use some of the System Center pieces with Configuration Manager to integrate that. You can set them to reboot when they log off, so they do get those updates. But being able to do that on-demand provisioning built into the brokers is one of the things we see a lot of feedback from the field when doing our deployments.
Yeah. And one other thing that I talk about, with the Smart Tools and for on-premises is the installation. Well, the installation of Horizon is simple. It requires you to download all the components separately. On Citrix, you download one ISO, you pop the ISO, and it will actually tell you, yes, you can install this piece here or not. Like, it will not allow you to install two things that might be conflicting with each other. Like if you already deployed delivery controller, it's not going to allow you to install the VDA, things of that nature. So it actually also helps you with prerequisites. So if there are things that needed before your delivery controller or your VDA can be applied or installed, it will install it for you. While on the VMware side of the house, it will tell you, hey, I am missing this, and then you have to go manually find what that is and download it and install it and then restart your implementation or installation. So that's one thing that from a convenience perspective, the Citrix installation is a little bit simpler because the ISO provides you with everything you need for every specific component you're deploying. How about remote access?
Yeah, on the remote access side, you know, both of them have some, you know, their pros and cons. Here on the Horizon side, you do have included with both types of remote access for them, whether it's security server or unified access gateway. Now, they don't really have any kind of HA or load balancing built in, so you're going to need an external piece to load balance those and to make those highly available. One thing I did find interesting, though, was that, and I think this has to do more with the VMware and the Azure announcement, is there's Hyper-V support for the Unified Access Gateway. Another thing, too, about Unified Access Gateway is that it's not only going to provide you access to the Horizon side of things, but also things like the identity and also to AirWatch. So you're kind of getting, you know, that's why it's been renamed from Unified Access, or from Access Point to Unified Access Gateway, because they're kind of putting all those things into that single appliance and including it with their products.
On the Citrix side of the house, you know, one thing that have you seen where it went is HDX proxy. You know, 2-3 years ago, we all hear about HDX proxy to be the solution to get rid of, you know, some of those CSG servers, Citrix Secure Gateway, that are still running. I mean, I have personal friends that are still running it, and they're like, "Why do I want to get rid of it and have to pay for something else?" So that is still there. It's still out there, and you know, Citrix made that announcement that you know, I think has been very quiet. But on the opposite side of the house, you know, if you do go and get a NetScaler, you know, you get your Unified Access Gateway, which is very similar. You know, you have single URL to access all your resources, whether that's SaaS applications, on-premises applications, or desktops. You know, provides you with the SAML authentication, provide you with your integration on SendMobile and ShareFile. So it gives you quite a bit. It also gives you your smart access control, meaning that you can allow people to access certain things depending on certain conditions, and obviously also give you that SAML authentication. And last but not least, you know, give you that HDX Insight information that we all love and try to use to troubleshoot issues and also to show information about our environment.
Yeah, so why NetScaler is, you know, is an upcharge depending on if you're using the gateway component or if you go to a higher edition to get these three pieces in there. Going to NetScaler Enterprise and getting not only just the load balancing components to be able to load balance and make highly available things in your environment, but also getting things like the unified gateway, the multi-factor authentication, HDX sites. You know, like I said, while it's an extra cost, it's good value for your environment instead of having to tie multiple solutions together. You know, secure gateway is kind of interesting because, you know, I still have customers that use it, and we still keep seeing patches for it. And hopefully one day we'll see something about HDX proxy out there, since it was announced and then kind of went MIA since the announcement. But I think, you know, hopefully with HDX proxy possibly, you know, hearing something about it would finally get a lot of those customers off of secure gateway.
And you know, I just realized that we are 4 minutes from the top of the hour, and we want to be respectful of your time. We had planned, and believe me, we have planned, I can show you here, live demos of both solutions that we're going to talk about here.
Actually, go ahead and just do live demos, and let's not go through the slides on those two things.
Okay.
We can kind of talk about the two slides with some of our thoughts about the different services, but go ahead and do your demos and talk about those since we're running late on time today.
Yeah. So as you can see, this is this is my Citrix Cloud session. I have already entered what is the management side of the house. It is a HTML5, you know, embedded browser. So you're actually, what Citrix Cloud is doing is presenting you with the full Citrix Studio, not the full, but it's a version of it, because there are certain modules that are not in here, like licensing, like storefront, and some other things that you cannot configure. But it's essentially the same thing. When you're provisioning, it goes through the same provision mechanisms. This Citrix Cloud, just let me rephrase for those who are not familiar, is Citrix offering for the hybrid workloads. What it means is that the control plane, what you're seeing here, your licensing, your management studio, your delivering controller, your storefronts, will live in the cloud managed by Citrix on an evergreen statement, and then, or state, sorry, and you have on your data center a what they call a Citrix connector. Is a single, or is a pair of delivery control, or sorry, connector servers that make that basically connection between your on-premises data center and workloads and the Citrix cloud. So when you go, to create your machine, this is hosted on Citrix cloud, and I can go here and say I'm going to create a desktop OS, or I can create a Windows OS. What I'm going to use to create it, is power is managed by MCS, which is is built into the solution. If you want to use PVS, you can actually make your own PVS deployment on premises, which will not be integrated, or is not integrated on the Citrix Cloud offering, but it doesn't stop you from using it, but kind of defeats the purposes of having the control plane in the cloud. So MCS will go there, you pick that, you can say, hey, give me random, and then as you can see, the next step is the Citrix Cloud offering is now talking to my connection server on my data center, and his connection server is stuck in my vCenter, and is bringing all my default templates and computers that I have there that I can provision from. So I'm going to pick my template for Windows 10, and then through the connection server, same thing. I'm asking how much RAM. Now it's using my internal AD, so it's looking at my AD. I can put my CUGC machines, sorry, not pound by this, and I can click on next. It's now going to ask me what my domain controller or my domain credentials are. So this is completely hosted in the cloud, but still through my connection server, which doesn't require you to open any other ports other than that server to have 443 out. Everything else is done through that connection server, so not need to open tons of firewall ports and so on and so forth. I'm going to enter my domain credentials. It will get validated, and then I can go click on next, give me the summary, create a catalog, test CUGC, Win 10 CUGC, and I can click finish, and now this system will go and actually start provisioning machines in my data center. So that's a great way of getting out of, hey, I need to start working on things like keeping up my database, backing up my database for Citrix and App and XenDesktop. How do I DR it? How do I ensure high availability? And just caring about what is important for most of us, which is that the user has a way to access the information. Some of the caveats, it's your URL to log in. It's given by them, so it will be whatever your company name is at XenDesktop.net. But when you log in, and the customizations are very minimum today, but when you're logging in, you will see there's no difference from logging in here to logging into your if you have it hosted on your data center. There are components of Citrix Cloud that can be moved to on-premises. For example, if you want full customization of the storefront, you can bring the storefront into your data center and tell Citrix Cloud, I'm using my own storefront. Then you can do your customization. But that, again, kind of defeats the purpose. And as you can see, I'm running everything on my data set on Citrix Cloud. Click on it, and it creates a connection to HTML connection on my workload that is actually sitting at home on my data center. So with that, I think we're running out of time, and we can do another session just on Citrix Cloud. We have a lot of information. We can share a lot more. I don't know why we run so much in time, but Jarian, I don't know if there are any questions out there that we want to talk about, or before we let people go. Unfortunately, I have another call that I kind of need to jump into here in the next 15 minutes, but I have a few minutes to answer some questions.
Go ahead and run through the Horizon one real quick, if you can show that, just to show them that, and then we can always do a follow-up one or post a follow-up blog with some videos and talking about the different cloud solutions. Definitely.
So I'm gonna log into the Horizon Cloud. So the first thing that you will find is that the Horizon Cloud requires you to do 2 authentications. I have pre-authenticated on one of them. eventually will come back up. And let me start logging in here as well. There you go. Now I need to enter my AD account, because you first log in into their management console, and then you log in into your Citrix, your Horizon AD. Trying to remember my password, sorry. Then let me click on hit on enter. Okay, oh, sorry, Molina admin. So this is the management console. It's a little bit more prescriptive, meaning that you have a little bit less ways to change things. So one of the things that we're gonna go, and I don't know what my mouse go. Where's my mouse? There you go. You come into a monitor and dashboard. When you come here to the assignment, basically what you do is you have an inventory, and on your inventory you have application images and imported VMs. Then you take those applications or images and create a new assignment. In this case, just to show apples to apples, I'm gonna do a desktop. When you look in desktop, the first thing is you can only deploy based on 4 predefined templates, which is a standard template, a advanced template, an enterprise template, and an enterprise plus. You cannot deviate from here. So if you want to do 6 gigs of RAM, 3 CPUs, or 4 gigs of RAM, 1 CPU, or 2 and 2, yeah, that you cannot pick from that. The interesting thing is, since it's also connected into your infrastructure through a connection mechanism, once you pick what you want, if you look at the bottom where it says capacity, 340 remaining, once you pick a solution, it will tell you how many more remaining of that type you have. So as you're changing between one or the other, you actually get to see, how much more capacity you have. So if you're trying to deploy more than you have capacity for, it would actually tell you you do not have enough capacity. Once you do that, you pick a master image, which you have defined when you do the other piece. You create an assignment name, so you define here, just I'm going to say the test of Horizon Cloud on-premises infrastructure. That's how they call the solution. You define which default protocol you want to use, whether that's BLAS or PC over IP, sorry. And if your client, you prefer to do that on a browser, or you prefer to do that on Horizon client. So you can define that up front. You define how many workstations you're going to create. And again, I don't know why it keeps losing my mouse. Let me hide this. Maybe that's what it is. There are other policies here that you can take to, like, your naming convention, your OU, your pulse setup. Horizon Cloud hybrid, or what they used to call hybrid mode, now is Horizon Cloud with on-premises infrastructure. Is based on just-in-time, which means that you have to have infrastructure that supports instant clones today. So vSAN, hyperconverge is what they're telling us that is what is supported today. So that's a little bit of a limitation there. You will add that to an Active Directory group, and then you will deploy. So very, very similar, a little bit more defined, but when the user logs in, they're gonna see a list of applications or desktops. Let me just log off really quick just to make sure that I can show you that login process like I did.
And then while he's logging off and going through the process real quick, I want to note that with the Horizon side, with the on-premises, it's going to be very prescriptive. I do like the way they did with their UI rework for their cloud solution, for their hybrid solution. But you're going to be more limited to vSAN ready nodes at this time. Whereas on the Citrix side, you kind of just can roll with whatever you have in your data center, in your lab. You can use different cloud subscriptions, etc., for those different workloads out there and for the integration points.
At the end, again, I'm running this on my infrastructure. This VM is running inside my infrastructure. I choose to do both as HTML5, so I can show you that they both work. But that's what we wanted to touch really, really quick on the hybrid cloud options. I know both companies have hype on cloud. We don't believe every customer is ready for cloud. You might be an exception, but in this case, when you have a lot of workloads that are still applications 3-tier that are still on your data center, but you don't want to continue to manage the infrastructure to run your VDI environment, your application publishing environment, your SBC environment, you do have options to move those components to the cloud and just care about your images, just care about your own workloads. So I know we went really fast.
So in both solutions, you were going to utilize, the cloud control planes for both of them and kind of reduce some of the infrastructure that you have, where they're maintaining those different control planes, being evergreen and so forth. And one of the big things that you're going to focus on more is the workloads, whether they're the virtual desktops or the RDSH/XenDesktop servers. And again, with Citrix Cloud, you have more flexibility of where you can run those workloads. And today with Horizon Hybrid on-premises is where you're going to have more of those vSAN-ready nodes. Eduardo, go ahead and pull up those 2 different slides you had on some of the things that you had notes on for Citrix Cloud and then for on the Horizon side.
Will do. Yeah, some of the things that we want to kind of highlight, Citrix Cloud XenDesktop service is a hybrid offer. If you do want all cloud, but as a hybrid, you still can have your workloads on Amazon. You still can have your workloads on Google Cloud or even Azure. If you do want a full managed solution all in the same cloud, then you go to XenApp Essentials, XenDesktop Essentials that are Azure-based. Support any infrastructure on premises when you do talking about XenApp and XenDesktop, so you don't have to have vSAN-ready nodes. You don't have to have anything like hyperconverged specific. The URL will be your company as my XenDesktop.com. Linux and Windows desktops can be published. App layering is completely supported. Some of the things are not supported today that might sway you away. No support for thin clients. So if you have a requirement for a PN Lite type of workload, not available today. No support for session recording. I know not a lot of companies use that, but I have run into companies that's a requirement. No multi-site support. So if you want to have a single URL but have access to your production farm and or site, sorry, I'm still Metaframe XP type of guy, and your dev, that you will require 2 different tenants. But as I mentioned, some of the on-premise features like AppDNA, HDX Insight, even PVS, you can deploy that on premises, and we'll still to continue to work with your Citrix Cloud. That URL shows you all the features comparisons between XenApp deployment mechanisms. It compares, Azure Essentials with on-premises with the Citrix Cloud offering. From a VMware side of the house, you must run vSAN work nodes today. Whether that's VxRail or vSAN. You will need to download for VxRail. You have the opportunity to download those connectors from the marketplace. They are desktops only, but as you saw, now they're coming out with the desktops and with applications as well. And I mentioned that is based on just in-time platform for it, which is instant clones, volumes, and UEM. Sorry for going so fast. I think we've run a little bit longer than expected. Thank you for attending our session. Thank you for being a CUGC member. We hope to see you out there in the community. Jarian, any comments?
No, my only thing is thank you guys for attending. We kind of went a little bit 10 minutes late on time there, so sorry about the rush at the end. If you guys would like, we could do a follow-up a webinar. To deep more into the cloud side. I know we have some comments and some questions. And again, we strongly recommend that, if you guys have a local CUGC group, get involved in that. If you don't, contact the HQ and definitely try to get one started because they've been very beneficial and helpful in both of our cases. So thank you again for attending today.
Yes, thank you to both of you guys. I really appreciate you holding your session again for us live, and I will definitely follow up with you about another webinar. And for all the attendees, I want to thank you for coming today. I put a couple of links in the chat window. There is a forum thread if you have more questions after today that you want to get to Jarian and Eduardo. You can put those in the forum. We'll make sure that they see them. And you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the presentation. And are you going to share your slides, slide deck?
We can definitely do that. We can definitely PDF it and send it to you. It can be shared. No reason why we couldn't do that, right, Jarian?
Yep, sharing is caring, so it'll be shared out.
Okay, we'll make sure you get a link to that as well. And finally, there is also a link in the chat window to a very short anonymous survey, and we always love to get your feedback. It helps us plan future webinars and content for CUGC. And with that, I will return you all to the rest of your day. Thank you again, Jarian and Eduardo. Hope to see you all on CUGC again soon.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.